Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi, and today we have a number of different segments, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me break it down for you. We start off with the world of politics, then a closer look at what happens in the world of business and finance. Sometimes we have stories about the interesting world of technology, in addition to what's happening in the arts. Our final segment of the show is all about sports. Let's take a short break and stay tuned for what we have in store for you. Starting off with politics, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said on Monday that emerging nations need low-cost financing to support them amid the current global economic crises, which marred the world since the coronavirus pandemic and continued with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The president made these remarks as he attended a debate session of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank meeting on the role of development banks in mobilizing the capital needed for boosting investment in infrastructure, supporting development efforts and creating more work opportunities. President al-Sisi expressed appreciation for the bank's roles in financing infrastructure projects, citing Egypt's pioneering experience in the field to adjust its infrastructure status, from which the country suffered and is still trying to overcome in the last 8 years. The 18Ds, meanwhile, stress on the importance of private capital in shrinking the gap of infrastructure projects financing, a problem beyond the capabilities of any government or even multi-party development bank to solely handle. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Monday witnessed the start of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank annual meeting in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Addressing the meeting's opening session, the president said that over the past 8 years, the state spent immense amounts of money to improve the infrastructure during a short period of time. And this is as part of comprehensive development drive. The president called on the bank to provide more low-cost funding to help developing nations overcome the repercussions of successive crises hitting the world. Topping them was the coronavirus pandemic and the Ukraine crisis. The meeting's inaugural session, held in Africa for the first time, was attended by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the Minister of Finance, Mohamed Maït, along with other ministers and senior statesmen. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Monday said that Egypt deeply appreciates its distinguished ties with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, being an important development partner for the state in its development drive. The president lauded Egypt's hosting of the bank's 8th annual meetings and said he is looking forward to exploring more cooperation with the bank in support for its transition into a green economy. President al-Sisi made these remarks as he met the bank's president and chair of the board of directors, Jinle Khan. He said he was honored to meet the head of state and offered Egypt thanks for hosting the bank's meetings being held for the first time in Africa. He can cherish the bank's close ties with Egypt financial institutions and hailed the country's pioneering experience in comprehensive social and economic development. He reiterated the bank's keenness to boost investment portfolios in Egypt, especially when it comes to financing infrastructure projects, and the meeting also touched on ongoing efforts to reform the international funding system and the role of multi-party development banks in enhancing capabilities of developing nations to confront the global economic challenges. And joining us over the phone to tell us more about these meetings is Dr. Mohamed Rushdi, an economic and financial expert. Good evening to you, sir.
Hello, good evening to you and our audience.
Sir, the AIIB is holding its 8th annual meeting here in Egypt, and it is the first time that the Asian Bank hosts a meeting outside of Asia and in Africa. Why is this something that is significant when it comes to the relationship between Egypt and the bank?
Actually, this is, in a nutshell, I would like to take you and our audience that this is the first time the theme of the conference of the 8th annual meeting is sustainable growth in a challenging world, which highlights AEIB continued commitment to supporting the key infrastructure demands of its members, all alludes to climate-centered global agenda and the compounding challenges faced by its members. And I believe one of the most important things, which is the sustainability goal, and I would like to start with one of the famous quotes that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. I would like to take you and our audience in a nutshell about the conference and the objective of conference mainly. And this is one of the most important things that we have to highlight, that we have more than, as far as I call, 106 countries, partners, business leaders, civil society organizations, and experts from a range of fields from all around the world. Actually, IIB president said that Egypt witnessed a big leap in growth of infrastructure under the presidential leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. This is in addition, Egypt's infrastructure has a special position in the world, citing the example of building the pyramids and Suez Canal that allows crossing, as far as I recall, which is 12% of the international trade. Can you imagine that 12% of the international trade is crossing the Suez Canal? This is in a lot of achievement that Egypt did it during the past years, actually the past 9 years, after President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi leading Egypt mainly, which is one of the most important things that establishing the new administrative capital, also the best projects carried out of the states in terms of solar energy, in terms of renewable energy in general. In addition to that, AIIB president underlined the necessity of attaching the special importance to infrastructure projects across the world in order to be able to absorb any natural catastrophe similar to what happened in Morocco and Libya. And also one of the most important things that the bank efforts in sustainable development and infrastructure, like solar energy resources to the country that need them, in addition to deepening cooperation with countries that need to achieve sustainable development and upgraded infrastructure. And this is, in a nutshell, the core things that highlighted by a lot of stakeholders during this meeting.
Yes, sir, part of the focus of the meetings itself was to discuss global matters as well. Given the number of issues or crises that happened around the world, like the COVID pandemic and then the Ukraine crisis and other things, there is in general a global slowdown economically, and inflation is high in almost every country in the world. How can these multi-party banks or countries in general somehow battle these issues and at the same time shelter the developing nations from the possibility of collapsing under all this pressure?
Actually, this is a good question, and mainly you hit a nerve. It is quite challenging to any of the developing countries and also developed countries, to be honest with you, to cope or adapt with the global wave of inflation, and a lot of people they can realize easily the massive increase in terms of the price of essential commodities, and this is due to a lot of things. As you know, and our audience, one of them after the pandemic, the Russian and Ukrainian conflict, actually, which negatively reflected on the price of wheat and oil. And one of the most important things is to have sustainable environment and sustainable financial, that AIIB is highlighting on it, is to overcome a lot of things, to invest on renewable energy, and which is mainly will positively reflect on absorbing any global catastrophe in addition to the infrastructure. And Egypt is giving a good example of that, the collaboration with AAIB. Actually, as far as I recall, Dr. Maid highlighted that we have already with AIB actually cooperation, which they already invested 1.3 billion for infrastructure projects in Egypt, including $30 million for water management and $200 million to finance renewable energy. Noting that in July, the bank also agreed to provide, as far as I recall, $280 million to fund the construction of a new metro line in Alexandria. And those things, to return back to your point, are the bridge to cross any catastrophe and to have a solid infrastructure that possibly reflect on production, and we can avoid easily any global catastrophe or conflict like what happened previously or pandemic through investing in infrastructure and have a renewable resource.
Sir, you spoke about how the world economy in general could somehow withstand the pressures of these different crises. But some of the subjects that they spoke about was tackling the repercussions of climate change as well. Like we've seen in recent times, the frequency of natural disasters has increased dramatically due to climate change. Do you believe that the world as a whole or these multi-party banks should somehow create funds for the poorer nations to handle such crises like what we've seen in many of the developing nations?
Actually, this is one of the most important things. This is that all the world is focusing on, all countries are focusing on it, actually, to have what they are calling a contingency plan, which is simplified to our audience, Plan B. Actually, in case of any catastrophe, what we shall do. Part of this to have a good infrastructure to overcome this, in addition to have diversified resources to have a solid economy and to overcome any catastrophe or conflict like what happened previously, Ukrainian-Russia war, and any pandemic like COVID-19. Actually, those are the main pillars to overcome any crisis, actually. And this what globally and all countries agreed on it. And for Egypt is leading this part in Africa, and globally we return it back to play our vital role in Africa continent and globally, and we are sending a great positive signals or messages to the globe through hosting COP27 last year, as far as I recall, in November, in addition to hosting a AIIB conference, actually nowadays, and this is aligned with the global trend and mindset.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed Rushdi, an economic and financial expert, thank you so much for joining us over the phone and highlighting the importance of the annual meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. Welcome back, and still on local news, members of the House of Representatives gathered at the House's premises on Tuesday to sign recommendation forms for candidates in the upcoming presidential elections 2024. The forms were drafted by the National Elections Authority under the Constitution's Article 142 that puts a condition for eligible candidates to get recommendations from at least 20 members of the House. Earlier, the authority said the presidential elections will start on the 1st of December for voters abroad and on the 10th of the same month for voters inside Egypt. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry held a tripartite meeting along with Greek and Cypriot counterparts where he said Egypt is committed to exploring new avenues for tripartite cooperation on Friday. Here's the story.
On the the sidelines of the high-level meetings of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, a ministerial-level meeting was held between Egypt, Greece, and Cyprus, where they discussed means of regional cooperation. The Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the meeting reflected the ministers' keenness on asserting close and strategic ties binding three countries. During the meeting, the ministers reviewed progress made in a number of joint projects at different fronts, including energy, tourism, transport, and agriculture. They also underscored the need to hold the 10th summit among the three countries' leaders and the need to expedite project implementation. Furthermore, the ministers stressed the need to enhance coordination within the East Mediterranean Gas Forum to maximize the use of gas resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. The tripartite mechanism became a main platform to discuss a host of regional and international issues of common concern as Libyan crisis, the situation in Syria, and the crisis in Sudan, as well as Palestinian cause. Meanwhile, Shukri referred to the latest developments in the Grand Ethiopian Nations Dam negotiations. He reiterated the importance of reaching legally binding agreement on the filling and operation of the dam. The ministers also agreed to continue coordination and consultation within the upcoming phase, along with close cooperation in various regional and international forums and issues related to the region's stability.
The health ministry in the Gaza Strip said 2 Palestinian protesters were wounded by Israeli bullets in clashes near borders with Israel on Monday. The Israeli Occupation Army, meanwhile, said it conducted a drone strike against a military post from which shots were fired against troops during cross-border protests. The strikes is the latest in a series of drone strikes against the Gaza enclave. The daily Palestinian demonstration against a 16-year-old Israeli blockade were organized after Israel closed the Ariz crossing from Gaza City this week, citing celebrations for a Jewish festival. Since September 13th, 7 Palestinians have been killed and dozens wounded in violence at the border, according to figures from the health ministry in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes struck militant sites in Gaza on Sunday for the third straight day. And the strike came on the heels of an Israeli military raid in the West Bank, the Palestinian health officials said. 2 Palestinians were killed. The story.
A series of violent escalations on the border between Israel and Gaza over the past week has raised the specter of an escalation for the first time since last May. There were no reported casualties from the strikes in Gaza. Earlier on Sunday, the Israeli military shot and wounded 5 Palestinians who were rallying at the separation fence along the Israeli frontier with the crowded enclave. The Israeli army said Sunday it had targeted 2 posts belonging to Hamas just east of Bruj refugee camp and Jabalia. The posts were close to the fence separating the territory from Israel, where dozens of Palestinians have been holding daily demonstrations for the past week. The Palestinian Health Ministry said 2 men, Asad Abu Ali, 21, and Abdurrahman Abu Daghash, 32, were killed by Israeli fire. The raid caused heavy damage to the camp's main road, severing water pipes and flooding parts of the street. The ground floor of the targeted building was heavily damaged, while part of the exterior wall of the second floor collapsed. Israel has been carrying out stepped-up military raids, primarily in the northern West Bank, for the past year and a half in what it says is a campaign to root out Palestinian fighters and thwart future attacks. But Palestinians say the raids entrench Israel's 56-year occupation over the West Bank. The raids have shown little sign of slowing the fighting and contributed to the weakening of the Palestinian Authority, the self-rule government that administers parts of Israeli-occupied West Bank. Some 190 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since the start of the year. Israel captured the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip in 1967 Middle East War. The Palestinians seek those territories for their hope for independent state.
Well, Welcome back, and joining us over the phone to tell us more about what's happening there is Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure.
Sir, can you tell us a bit about what's happening in the West Bank and Gaza? It seems like the escalation keeps getting worse.
It is one crime which is repeatable every day, and we have to live with it. Because we are living in a world with different standards of dealing with a matter like that. And whenever you talk seriously to the Americans or the Europeans, they would confess that it's unfair to continue this crime. Mm-hmm. But I hope that we are supporting our Palestinian brothers, and in whatever time it takes. No way that Israel can live all the time like that. Mm-hmm. What is a future for a country where the Arabs in the coming 20 years will exceeding the Jews, and then they will be a sort of discrimination between this and that. So that's why all the real friends of Israel are calling for the two-state solution. Even President Biden, when he came to visit our Middle East conference in Jeddah, he said the same, the two-state solution. So our duty, I think, that we should support and continue supporting our brothers in Palestine, and really we admire their good stand, and they do not leave their land, they do not leave their country or their houses. Of course, we shall make a lot of sacrifices, yes, but at the end of the day, we shall win this battle by all means.
Yes. Sir, is there actually a possibility for some sort of negotiations to reach the two-state solution when, in fact, the current government of the Israeli government right now is a very hardline right-wing government, and in fact, many members of it are outright racist? How is this even possible?
Exactly. This is a problem in Israel. Israel, since it was established, no one party won the elections. It's always whether the Labour or the Likud can win less than 50%. So the only way to establish a government is to make a sort of alliance. Here now, the head of the government was an extremist, and when he wanted to make a government, he was obliged to go to people who are much more extremist than him. The defense minister who invaded the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and those who are every day invading the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So I do not dream of having a government now which can be wise enough to face the realities that there isn't any future for a policy like that. But let us accept the sacrifice, and we should continue for these sacrifices for the next 20, 30 years, and at the end of the day, we shall win this battle.
Okay, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. A war monitor said Tuesday that fighters loyal to the Syrian government have clashed with Kurdish-led forces in a mainly Arab district of eastern Syria, leaving 25 people dead in 2 days. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, said they had driven out the gunmen who had infiltrated the Diban area of Deir ez-Zor province in clashes that erupted Monday. Britain-based Monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, said the latest clashes erupted when pro-government fighters crossed into the Euphrates River, which separates the pro-government forces in southwestern Deir ez-Zor from the SDF in the northeast. It added that these clashes continued until Tuesday at dawn, causing 42 injuries. At least 20 people were killed in an explosion at a fuel depot in Azerbaijan's Nagorno-Karabakh on Monday, according to local Armenian authorities. They added 290 people were admitted to hospital, dozens of them in critical condition. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said on Tuesday an international observer mission from the Nagorno-Karabakh region can happen only with the agreement of Azerbaijan. The story. The European Union said that Brussels will play host to senior envoys from long-term foes Azerbaijan and Armenia on Tuesday after Baku's victory in breakaway Nagorno-Karabakh. Meanwhile, the International Committee of the Red Cross said in a statement that a fuel explosion in the breakaway region has resulted in hundreds of burn victims. The blast occurred as thousands of Armenians are fleeing the region after their fighters were defeated by Azerbaijan in a lightning military operation. Earlier, authorities in the region said that at least 20 people were killed and nearly 300 others injured by an explosion at a crowded gas station in Nagorno-Karabakh as thousands of people rushed to flee into Armenia. Armenia's government said that more than 13,500 people had fled across the border since Azerbaijan defeated separatists who have governed the breakaway region for about 30 years in a swift military operation. Residents of Nagorno-Karabakh scrambled to flee as soon as Azerbaijan lifted a 10-month blockade on the region's only road to Armenia. That blockade has caused severe shortages of food, medicine and fuel. While Azerbaijan has pledged to respect the rights of Armenians, many residents feared reprisals. Azerbaijan also said Tuesday that 30 metric tons of gasoline and 34 metric tons of diesel fuel were being sent into the region. The United States has said it will evaluate its next steps on the crisis in Niger. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters in Nairobi while they gave diplomacy a chance, the U.S. will also continue to evaluate any future steps that will prioritize both U.S. diplomatic and security goals. The story.
The United States said it will evaluate its next steps on the crisis in Niger after France announced a full troop withdrawal as demanded by the nation's new leaders. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters in Nairobi while they give diplomacy a chance, the U.S. will also continue to evaluate any future steps that would prioritize both U.S. diplomatic and security goals. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters on Monday that France's decision to pull its troops out of the West African country does not change U.S. posture in Niger. France fields 1,500 soldiers in Niger as part of an anti-militant deployment in the Sahel region, and the U.S. 1,100 military personnel. French President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday announced that France would withdraw its ambassador from Niger shortly, with French troops leaving by year's end. The decision came 2 months after the July 26 movement that ousted pro-Paris President Mohamed Bazoum. Macron added that military cooperation was over and French troops would withdraw in the months and weeks to come, with a full pull-out by the end of the year. The Pentagon had announced on September 7 that some U.S. soldiers were being transferred as a precaution from a base in the capital Niamey to an air base to the north in the Agadez region. The U.S. said on September 18 it was resuming surveillance flights over Niger, which had been halted by the movement, with other operations on hold. Tens of thousands had taken to the streets of Niamey in support of the new leaders and the demand for the French ambassador and the troops to leave, but Niamey remained calm after Macron's announcement. The military regime welcomed the pullout, saying that they celebrate a new step towards the sovereignty of Niger.
Moving to business and finance and some local news, where the Trade and Industry Minister Ahmed Samir on Tuesday discussed with the UK Prime Minister's trade envoy to Egypt, Jeffrey Donaldson, means of boosting joint cooperation in trade, industry investment and in both food and medicine security. The minister said the ministry's identified 152 investment opportunities to launch manufacturing projects in Egypt, saying these are promising projects for British businesses. He added that the state is now providing unprecedented incentives for strategic projects, notably those intended to meet production inputs needed for the industrial sector. The Petroleum Ministry launched an international bidding round on Monday for exploration in 23 open blocks in Egypt, with the offer deadline set for February 25th. According to an official statement, the round includes 10 areas in Egypt's Western Desert, 2 in the Eastern Desert, 7 in the Gulf of the Suez, and 4 in the Red Sea. After recent similar offers, analysts and energy experts assume that Egypt, as the most populous Arab country, has sought to position itself as a regional energy hub. In money markets, the U.S. Treasury yield scaled fresh 16-year peaks on Tuesday, keeping the dollar near a 10-month high. The yields on the 10-year Treasury notes rose as high as 4.566%, a level not seen since October 2007. The U.S. dollar, which measures the currency against 6 major developed market peers, includes the euro and yen, ticked up 0.09% after an overnight for the first time since November 30th. The euro sagged at 0.08%, approaching the overnight low on mid-March. Sterling slipped at 0.14%, taking it back towards Monday's 6-month lows. The dollar also held near an 11-month peak of 148.97 yen from overnight rising the risk of intervention by Japanese authorities. Italy is under growing market scrutiny as Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni prepares a difficult 2024 budget, with investors dismayed by government moves affecting sectors from banks to airlines. The Treasury will issue new economic targets on Wednesday, providing the framework for a budget in which Meloni will attempt to keep her tax-cutting promises while also lowering the fiscal deficit. The task is made all the harder by a weakening growth outlook and costly financial incentives for green home improvements, which were introduced long before she took office but continue to weigh on public accounts. This comes amid signs of souring market sentiment towards Italy, with a public debt equal to about 142% of national output, the second largest in the Eurozone after Greece. Moving to science and technology, NASA's first asteroid sample fetched from deep space parachuted into the Utah desert to cap a 7-year journey. Japan, the only other country to bring back samples, gathered about a teaspoon during a pair of asteroid missions. Here's the story.
NASA's first asteroid samples fetched from deep space parachuted into the Utah desert Monday to cap a 7-year journey. In a flyby of Earth, the Osiris-Rex spacecraft released the sample capsule from 63,000 miles out. The small capsule landed 4 hours later on a remote expanse of military land as the mothership set off after another asteroid. To everyone's relief, the capsule was intact and not breached, keeping its 4.5 billion-year-old samples free of contamination. Within 2 hours of touchdown, the capsule was inside a temporary clean room at the Defense Department's Utah Test and Training Range, hoisted there by helicopter. The sealed sample canister will be flown on Monday to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, where it will be opened in a new specially designed lab. The building already houses the hundreds of pounds of moon rocks gathered by the Apollo astronauts. Scientists estimate the capsule holds at least a cup of rubble from the carbon-rich asteroid known as Bennu, but won't know for sure until the container is opened in a day or two. Some spilled and floated away when the spacecraft scooped up too much material, which jammed the container's lid during collection 3 years ago.
In sports, defending champion Manchester United look to avoid another early season setback when it hosts Crystal Palace in the 3rd round of the League Cup. It's the only all-Premier League clash among Tuesday's games, with Wolverhampton visiting Ipswich and Burnley travelling to League Two side Salford City. United also face Palace at home in the league on Saturday, and manager Erik ten Hag will have to decide how heavily to rotate for a competition that provided him with his first title at the club season. United is already 9 points behind Premier League leader Manchester City, and the League Cup may be Ten Hag's best chance for silverware again. Tottenham Hotspur said they have reached an agreement to sign defender Luka Vazovic from Croatia's Hajduk Split, with the 16-year-old to join the Premier League club in 2025. Vazovic will join the Spurs on a contract running until 2030, the club said on Monday. British media reported the deal was worth around £12 million. Under FIFA rules, Vazovic must wait until he's 18 before he can arrive in England. The centre-back has played 11 times for Hajduk Split since making his senior debut in February, becoming the youngest player to feature in the Croatian top flight. Top-seeded Alexander Zverev will play for a 21st career title after beating third-seeded Grigor Dimitrov 6-3, 7-6 in the semi-finals of the Shandong Open on Monday. The 26-year-old German will meet Roman Saflun in the Tuesday final. The 55th-ranked Russian defeated second-seeded Lorenzo Musetti 6-3, 6-4. Zverev hit 10 winners and 4 aces in the first set, and his serve continued to be effective in the second. The 26-year-old Sofiane will be playing in his first career final in his 8th year on tour. At the Yahoo Championship, top-seeded Karen Khachanov defeated fourth-seeded Sebastian Korda 7-5, 6-4 to move into the final in his second tournament since returning from injury. Khachanov will face Yoshihiro Nishoka in Tuesday's final. The 8th-seeded Japanese player beat Aslan Karatsev 6-4, 6-4. In a tight first set, Khachanov gained a crucial break in the 11th minute when Korda found the net with a drop shot. The 15th-ranked Russian improved in the second set and dominated the baseline rallies to overpower the 23-year-old American. Europe suffered their worst Ryder Cup defeat 2 years ago at a hostile Whistling Straits, but captain Luke Donald believes the energy of the home crowd in Rome can be a decisive factor in reclaiming the trophy this week. Former world number 1 Donald was one of the Padraig Harrington's vice-captains in 2021 as the United States romped up a 19-9 victory in a match sadly lacking European fans because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This year's edition will feel and sound much more like it for Donald's dozen, with thousands of fans from across the continent descending on Rome's Marco Simone course. Plenty of Americans will make the trip too, but home advantage will definitely favor Europe as they look to continue their domination on soil. United States captain Zach Johnson is attempting to mastermind a first U.S. victory on European soil since a 15-13 victory at the Belfry 30 years ago. Well, that brings us to the end of the sports segment of the show and the show itself. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here.